it's always been a horrific thing for journalists to do their jobs, and yet we require that. We need that as a democracy, or I should say, a grouping of democracies. We need people out there that are going to tell the truth.
You're listening to Radio Free Mike. Welcome to Radio Free Mike, the podcast about freedom and its discontents. My name is Michael Scott Moore, and today we're talking to Roger Carstens about Austin Tice's strange disappearance in Syria. Austin was kidnapped in 2012 as a journalist and a former Marine, and he was Roger's first as well as one of his last cases before he left government earlier this year. Roger has served as SPEHA under two presidents. That's a Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs, and we'll talk about what that means. But when Damascus fell on December 8th and the Syrian prisons began to empty, there was some hope that Austin might be found. Roger went to look for him in Damascus in late December, and we'll talk about that as well as the evidence of a dramatic escape attempt in 2012 or 2013, and what the chances are now of finding Austin alive. Roger, welcome.
Mike, I'm glad to be with you.
I just want to, we're going to talk about Austin Tice's case, but I just want to explain to people what your involvement was. I think most people don't know what SPEHA is. It means Special Envoy to the President for Hostage Affairs. But what does that mean?
I'm glad, sometimes I'll go straight into talking about an issue, realizing that I'm blowing past all the content. So I'm grateful you started here. It's an office that was started in 2015 by President Obama. Mm-hmm. I mean, you very well recall what happened from 2012 to 2014. Yeah, we had a few Americans that were taken by ISIS. They were held hostage in Syria. Yep. And the U.S. government had pretty much no response other than to tell everyone that the United States does not talk to terrorist groups. Right. And sadly, when the families tried to get information from the U.S. government on what was being done to bring their loved ones home, they were either given the stiff arm or they were passed from phone to phone to phone. Or if they finally talked to someone in authority, that person would usually say, I can't discuss it. It's classified. Right. Now, in the wake of this, Diane Foley started the Foley Foundation. And Diane, working with David Bradley and a few others, were able to petition, if you will, the Obama administration into having this hostage policy review. Then they created SPEHA, the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, headquartered at the State Department and reporting to the Secretary of State, but appointed by the President. And that the role of that office is to conduct the diplomatic negotiations and engagements required to bring back both hostages, those taken by terrorists, and wrongful detainees, those taken by nation states. Right. I was the third SPEHA. I followed two wonderful O'Briens, Jim O'Brien under President Obama, Robert O'Brien under President Trump. President Trump appointed me in 2020, and President Biden kept me on for a 4-year term. So I spent 5 years in the job. And in that role, my job was to, as stated, go find ways to bring people home that were being held by other groups. So I took the role in 2020. The first family I met was the Tice family. Talked to Deborah Tice within about probably 2 or 3 days of taking the job. And it was very clear to me that this was going to be a case that was going to occupy a central part in my life. And my goal was to try to bring Austin home to his mother and his father.
Right. So Austin was basically on your desk from almost the first day, and he was captured 8 years earlier. So he was captured in 2012, which is the year a lot of us get captured. You mentioned everybody in Syria.
Sorry about that.
But I was captured in January, and a lot of us didn't know about each other. Right. One journalist said I was the first in the series that year, in 2012, and that included Jim Foley and Austin,
That's right.
and Theo Padnos and a few other people. Most of them were captured in Syria. Austin was captured in August, and after going into Syria kind of illicitly, he found a way in without what might be called legal ways. Yeah. And the thing about journalists disappearing in Syria that year is that the civil war had gotten really dangerous, and not all the journalists kidnappings were reported. So a lot of them were blacked out. And I don't think every journalist who disappeared in Syria knew about the others.
It's always been a horrific thing for journalists to do their jobs, and yet we require that. We need that as a democracy, or I should say, a grouping of democracies. We need people out there that are going to tell the truth. And I think in Syria and maybe Somalia, I know you spent some really tough years there. I spent about a year and a half of my life in Somalia. Yep. And sometimes it's hard for journalists to go and get his passport stamped when there's a civil war going on. Or perhaps there is a place to get your passport stamped, but the other side would not want you to tell the story. You have to weigh these things on how you're going to go and tell the truth and and let people know what's happening. And I have to salute people like Austin and Theo and you for doing the jobs. And let's even, I know we're going to stay in Austin here, but let's even take it out to Evan Gershkovich and Danny Fenster being arrested. Danny by the Burmese government, and of course Evan Gershkovich by the Russian government. Obviously these autocratic governments are trying to not only, take someone off the chessboard, someone like a great reporter like Evan Gershkovich, but they're also trying to instill a chilling effect so that journalists are, maybe a little reticent about doing their jobs. And I'm just grateful that every day there's still brave people out there, Americans and otherwise, that are still taken to the streets and trying to dig out the truth and report it, even at the cost of their own safety.
Yeah, Evan was arrested just for being in Moscow, essentially.
Yeah.
Anyway, I met him in Berlin, and I hope he'll be on the podcast when his book is out.
I'll pressure him.
But the thing about, so first of all, Syria was very complicated, which is why it was a little bit mysterious who actually captured Austin in 2012. But the first clue was a video that came out that tried to make it look. It looked on the surface like he was captured by Al-Qaeda style terrorists. Yeah. So they were shouting Allahu Akbar, and they were wearing robes, and they were walking in some remote area. And of course, it was Al-Qaeda style terrorists who were the rebels. Turned out that was kind of a fake video.
Yeah. So we had some great analysts at the CIA.
Yep.
Not that they had to be the CIA. I mean, there's some smart people everywhere that were able to pick up on a few clues in the video, which, made it pretty clear that it was a fake video. And I think the consensus in the U.S. government was that this was made by the Syrians as a diversionary tactic. Yeah. We could always guess why. I could probably have 2 or 3 guesses. I bet they're all right. But regardless, they were trying to, push the blame of taking Austin onto Al-Qaeda as opposed to taking on their own shoulders. But yeah, that's really like the last time, other than something you'll probably bring up, his prison escape, that we really get a sense of where he is and what's happening to him. And I would say that the video, in a way, is his last real proof of life. You could argue that what happened in October when he escaped and the Syrians put out a "Be on the lookout," a BOLO announcement. We might be able to take that as a proof of life. But, after that video and after the BOLO that happened in October, we just didn't really get much.
Yeah, and that's scary because his was one of the longest cases that I was aware of. I mean, he was in, like we said, he was held for 8 years by the time you got to the case.
Yeah.
So the point is that the phony video was probably to distract from the fact that he was eventually in government hands. So kidnapped, we're not sure by who, so. maybe by businessmen who then sold him on, whatever. He wound up in government hands and in a government prison. And those government prisons are pits. Those government prisons were notoriously deep and dangerous, places of torture, places of really spooky disappearances. So what I don't. So the point is, he was held for this long, and there was very little negotiation. That's why it was such a mystery who was holding him. Nobody reached out. So as far as I know, I mean, you were involved in the case, so maybe there was some back channel things happening in the first several years. But whoever had him didn't seem to want anything back for him, at least in the first few years.
I mean, there's a great story that just came out today in the Washington Post. And by you probably know some of that. Oh, there are 4 people wrote it. I don't want to name them all, but they're all great reporters. They did a lot of good spade work. I read it thinking, my goodness, it's pretty accurate. And they outlined some of the U.S. government outreach, either through the CIA or through the State Department over the years. The Syrians didn't seem to want anything. I feel comfortable telling you what they wanted when I asked for it, because it's just been out so much that it's pretty much common news. And that when I met with the Syrians in Damascus with Kash Patel, I met with Ali Mamluk, who might very well be responsible for ordering the deaths of over 100,000 people. He talked about
Ali Mamluk.
People.
Tell us who Ali Mamluk was.
He's the head of intelligence for Assad.
Under Assad's regime.
You kind of think Ali Mamluk would be the equivalent of the CIA director in the United States.
Right.
And he was also responsible for kind of orchestrating the roundup of the enemies of the regime and directing what were to happen to them. The numbers are really flaky. It could be anywhere from 100 to 200,000 people just went into the prisons and disappeared. They don't even really have the numbers. And where someone would go in and maybe they'd come out 6 years later, no one would hear from them. They just disappear. Or they'd go in, be tortured, die under interrogation, or be executed, and then cremated. Buried in mass graves, vats of acid to make that evidence go away. But that's the person that I met and talked to him about Austin Tice in a meeting in Damascus in 2020.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this has been a free preview of this episode. And the whole thing is open to paid subscribers to Radio Free Mike. So if you'd like to hear the rest, please hit the link in your show notes or in the body of the email we've sent you and upgrade your subscription over at Substack. Then you'll be able to listen to the full episode on any platform. Thanks for listening.